I've shown to Mr. Cochran. I'd like to show them to the witness. Mark the first one, People's next in order, 503.
503.
I think that's right. All right, so showing you People's 503. Can you tell us if you recognize, in general, that as the appearance of the inside of the plane?
Yes, it is.
And does that look like first class, sir?
It does.
See if I can put this on the Elmo so the jury can see it too, Your Honor. All right, and that's where you walked up to that area to speak with the defendant. Is that right, sir?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Bingham, there's a monitor right to your right there.
Thank you.
Mr. Wooden, I think we need the styrofoam overhead. Yes, thank you.
Now, do you see the blue seats farther to the rear? Can you see on your monitor, sir?
Yes. Yes.
You see the blue seats to the rear of the first class seating, sir?
Yes, I see them.
Is that back where you were seated?
Unfortunately, it was that night. Can I say something?
Wait,
Oh no, I'm sorry.
do you have the whole row to yourself, sir?
I did.
Now you had. Okay, you told us, sir, that you spent about 1 minute with the defendant at that point.
Yes, it was around there, a minute and a half minute. I don't know. I wasn't timing, but it was fast.
And was there a stewardess that works in first class who was there at the time?
Yes, it was.
Was she the one that told you to have a seat because they were going to take off?
Yes.
Okay, now, first class has its own its own bathroom, doesn't it, sir?
Yes, it does.
And I'm going to show you another photograph. Oh, another couple photographs. People's 504, Your Honor. Let me show you first close up, sir, and ask you. You've sat in first class before, haven't you?
Normally, I do.
This was an exception this night.
I had a lot of phone calls and said, "Bingham, you can coach."
How did that happen?
What?
That they put you in coach?
No, what happened was it was at night, and so I had a whole row, and so I just went to sleep.
So that was okay.
It was for me because I rested.
Okay.
As much. But I had a lot of phone calls that next afternoon, that next morning that I was on the opening statements. Say, Bingham, you're cheap. Anyway.
World-class photographer sitting in coach. Is that right?
The world's greatest.
Right, I'm sorry. You're a smart man, Judge.
All right, I'm showing you what appears to be a door on the left-hand side of the seating, and I'm going to direct your attention to that area for my following questions. This appears to be first class, does it not?
Yes, it is.
You're familiar with what that looks like?
Yes.
And the door that I'm pointing to on the left, sir, is that a bathroom door?
Yes, I think so. I think it is from here. Yeah, I cannot see this side.
Let me show you another picture that might be a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
People's 505, Your Honor.
505.
Mr. Bingham, if I can show you People's 505, a little bit closer view of that door in conjunction with the other photograph, taken from a different
Yes.
perspective, but
Yes,
appear to be a lavatory door, sir?
it is.
All right, thank you. I may show it to the jury, Your Honor. On the elbow.
Yes.
Mr. Bingham, for the benefit of the jury, sir, can you tell us, we were just discussing the door to the left. This is in first class, correct?
Right.
Okay. And you're facing, there's that white arrow there.
Yes,
Is that white arrow pointing to the door?
it is.
That's a lavatory door, correct?
Right.
And in People's 505, People's 505, sir, on the right-hand side of this photograph, we're facing from the other direction. Is that the first-class lavatory door on the right-hand side?
It is.
All right. Thank you, sir. Now, that was a red-eye flight, was it not, sir?
Yes.
And so you slept through it, right?
Most of the flight.
And how long a flight was it?
It was under 4 hours, I think.
Okay. And had you planned to sleep through that flight, sir?
I would always would like to. Sometimes I cannot.
Okay. And that night you did?
Most of it I did, yes.
Were the lights dimmed on that red-eye?
Yes, sure.
And isn't that pretty usual when you're on a red-eye flight, they dim all the lights?
Yes,
Because people like to sleep.
yes.
All right, so you did not see the defendant throughout the entire flight, correct?
I did not.
Now, do you recall what the defendant was wearing when you went up to see him in first class for that 1-minute conversation?
I do not. No.
Did you happen to notice whether he was writing anything or signing any autographs at that time?
I did not see him signing any autographs. He was alone, and he was doing something, putting some money in his hands or something like that. I don't know exactly what.
And was he standing or was he seated at the time you spoke to him?
He was actually sitting sitting on the middle seats in the middle at that time.
So he was already sitting down when you saw him?
Not all the way down, but on the middle.
On the armrest?
On the armrest in the middle, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And which hand was it that he put into his pocket, if you know?
I didn't see him put his hand into his pocket. I just saw him doing something with his hands.
Do something with his hand?
Oh, yeah, right. He had some money in it or something. I don't know.
Okay. Was he taking his hand out of his pocket, or?
I did not see him.
Didn't see that, did you?
No,
Okay. Would it be fair to say, sir, you weren't paying particularly close attention to his hands?
I was not. No, I was not.
Okay. You weren't expecting to see any injury or any cuts on him, were you, sir?
I was not looking for anything.
Right, you weren't looking for any. And then you saw him again in Chicago, correct?
I did.
And at that time, sir, did you spend a long time talking to him?
A while. While he was waiting on his bags and I was waiting on my luggage.
Okay. And how long is a while, sir?
A few minutes, a couple minutes. So what happened was, okay, yes.
Okay. And at that time, were you paying close attention to his hands or trying to
No,
observe?
I was not.
Okay. Trying to make any That's all right. I'll just stop. He knows. So you weren't looking to see if he was injured particularly, is that true?
I did not.
All right. So you and the defendant are not close personal friends. Would that be a fair statement?
Right.
You're acquaintances, correct?
Yes.
And if there was some subtle difference in the way he was acting on that particular night, you would not detect it. Would that be a fair statement?
I don't know. I just know how he was with me. Hi, Bingham.
Yeah.
How you doing? Like that.
Okay. And if he was putting on an act to try and cover up what was going on inside, if he was feeling differently than he'd appeared, you wouldn't know that, would you?
Sustain.
Okay, you can only tell us what you were able to observe, correct?
Yes.
You saw how he behaved outwardly. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
You don't know what he was feeling inside, do you?
Or
You can answer that.
What's that now?
You can answer that.
What's
Oh.
that?
You don't know what he was feeling inside, do you, sir?
I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bingham.
Thank you.
Cochran?
Mr. Bingham, if Mr. Simpson was acting that night, he'd been acting that same way since 1968, is that right?
He was the same to me. Whenever I see him, he knows me because of Ali. So, hey, Bingham, ask me about Ali. So,
All right. Thank you very much for coming, and give our best to the champ. Will you do that?
I shall. Thank you.
Ms. Clark? May you redirect?
Thank you, I have nothing
All
for
right,
you.
Mr. Bingham, thank you very much for coming in, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cochran, your next witness, please.
The next witness, Your Honor, was Mr. Steve Balerie. We are ready to proceed.
All right. All right, Mr. Valerie, would you stand at the podium there, please, face the clerk?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the trial conference before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat on the witness stand and state and spell your first and last names for the record.
Stephen Valerie, Stephen Valerie.
Mr. Cochran.
Very kindly. Good morning, Mr. Valerie.
Morning.
Mr. Valerie, did you fly back into Los Angeles last night to be here to testify with us today?
I sure did.
And Mr. Valerie, I want you to look at the gentleman to my left over here, Mr. O.J. Simpson. Had you ever seen him in person prior to June 12th of 1994?
Never.
On that date, on June 12th of 1994, did you have occasion to board an American Airlines Flight 668 from Los Angeles to Chicago?
That is correct.
And before we get to that, what is your present occupation or avocation?
I just graduated from MBA program at UCLA.
UCLA?
Correct.
All right. And at that, in June of 94, were you a student at UCLA at that point?
Correct.
Right.
Just completed my first year.
Now, in that connection, do you remember approximately what time it was that you boarded this particular flight 668?
I boarded just right as they were closing the gates. I'd say probably about 11:40.
All right. And when you boarded the flight, were you seated in either in coach or in first class?
I was upgraded to first class and
All right.
sat in seat 4A.
All right. And when you're upgraded, you use your stickers? You're
Correct.
a frequent traveler?
Absolutely.
When you take your coach ticket, you're able to buy your way into first class.
That's correct.
All right. May I approach, Your Honor, 1245?
You may.
I want you to take a quick look at, have you ever seen this diagram before? 1245?
I saw it on the opening statements.
Okay. And in that connection, the front part of the plane up here is first class, is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's an area here that generally puts you in row 5. I guess that's row 5. At any rate, let me strike that, Your Honor. What row did you occupy that night in first class?
I sat in what they number row number 4. In fact, it was the second row on that side of the plane, and the
Okay.
third row from Mr. Simpson's side.
All right. And so let me see if I can understand this. And this was a Super 80 plane. In that plane, there's 2 seats on each side of first class and 1 aisle.
Correct.
All right. Now you can turn that. And in that connection, did you sit in a window seat or in an aisle seat?
I sat in the window seat,
So your seat number was what?
4A.
And Mr. Simpson then would be across the aisle from you in which seat, if you recall?
4D.
All right. Now,
If
when
it's-
you first got on the plane, did you see Mr. Simpson at that time?
When I first got on the plane, no, I entered first.
All right.
Was standing, organizing my bags, putting in the overhead, and then saw him enter right after I did.
And you saw Mr. Simpson enter a short time after you did.
Correct.
All right. And when you first saw him, did you recognize him?
Sure, immediately.
All right. And after he first entered, did you have occasion to observe him at that point?
I observed him pretty much from the moment he entered the flight.
All right. Tell us what you observed about him at the time as you saw him enter the flight.
I noticed, first off, that obviously he came on board last. I had expected I would be the last on board. So he came on, and I looked back, and he, I think others in the first class and also in the cabin class noticed him, and so everyone had his eyes gazed upon Mr. Simpson. And I proceeded to take my seat, and he put one of his bags in the overhead compartment, and the gentleman sitting behind me in seat 5B, that would be, said hello to him, and they knew each other, it seemed like, from their conversation. It was a brief conversation. They shook hands, and the flight attendant, motioned that it was time to sit down, time to get ready for takeoff, and so I also believe right before takeoff, Mr. Simpson asked for a glass of water, and that was brought out to him before takeoff.
All right. Now, you made all these observations from your location there at 4A primarily, right?
That's correct.
And when Mr. Simpson first entered, can you describe, and as he was interacting with the other passengers, can you describe for the jury his mood, how he appeared to you?
He was
How he appeared?
Overruled.
He was very pleasant, smiling. I noticed his clothing was very well pressed, looked very sharp. In fact, I was looking particularly just because of his celebrity from his Herz commercials and the fact that he was so late on board. I was looking to see if he was sweating, and he looked absolutely normal. His clothing was very well pressed, and he sat down and looked over actually a couple times at the beginning and then later on the flight, and smiled and seemed very approachable.
All right. You mentioned his clothes were neatly pressed. Do you have a recollection? Can you, the best you can now, describe for this jury how he was dressed in your best recollection?
Sure. He was wearing, to my recollection, a button-down shirt with long sleeves, with a T-shirt underneath. He had some kind of cotton pants on, either khaki or light blue or something. He was wearing leather loafers with leather mesh on the front portion of the shoe. He wasn't wearing any socks that evening, and hair was trimmed. I mean, that's
what you recall about him. Is that
correct.
Do you know whether? No, strike that. Now, you made these observations again from your seat in 4A. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at some point, the stewardess told you to, or the flight attendant is probably a more appropriate statement, Your Honor. The flight attendant suggested that everybody should get in their seats because the flight would be taking off. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mr. Simpson was the only one really standing at that point, and so it was just a quick. We're getting ready for takeoff, so everyone take your seats.
All right. So after a period of time, the flight did in fact take off. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you, for a period of time after you were airborne, have occasion to observe Mr. Simpson additionally?
Yes. After takeoff, I was awake for probably about, I would estimate a little over an hour of the flight, of a 3.5-hour flight. I positioned myself actually facing him, using the fuselage of the plane as a backrest, if you will.
Let me see if I can explain that.
Sure.
Use the fuselage of the plane. If you're seated, so I can use this demonstration. If you're seated, and this is the pilot up here, you would normally be seated straight forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Simpson's, I understand, would be to your right over to the window seat. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
And what you're demonstrating for us, move me around, how you moved yourself around so you could see Mr. Simpson.
You can rotate like this. I leaned about this angle and had my feet up. I elevated the the leg rest of the other seat as well as mine, so I'd have just a little bit more leg room. So that position had a pretty clear view of Mr. Simpson throughout the flight.
All right, so for the record, Your Honor, he's indicated he turned his body, I guess, to the left, so his back would be against. Is that the end window behind you?
Correct.
And then you had a clear view toward where Mr. Simpson was seated.
Actually, it looks to me like you're turning to the right
Let's see.
and at a 40 to 45 degree angle facing diagonally is what it appears to me to be.
Well, you know what? I think you're right. I think you're right. Moving to the right, 45 degrees. Thank you, Your Honor. And from that vantage point, then, were you able to see Mr. Simpson?
Yes, I was. And observed him.
I'll ask
Sustained.
another question.
Ask another question.
Now, from that vantage point, what did you observe, if anything, about Mr. Simpson? Tell us what you saw in your own words.
The first thing I noticed was before takeoff, he was asked to put his bag underneath his seat, and he put that bag, a small black leather duffel bag, underneath the seat directly in front of him before takeoff. After we took off, he pulled that same bag out and put it on the empty passenger seat next to him, and proceeded to open that bag up and pulled out a manila envelope. I'm sorry, not an envelope, a manila folder with a document inside. Why I call it a document, I was able to see that it was a double-spaced type document on white paper, 8.5 by 11, and it was loose leaf. So he proceeded to read that document at the point at which I was observing him.
Ask him what happened.
Oh, ask him what happened next.
All right. Okay, I'll do that. What happened next?
He proceeded to read that, sipped on his water, and it was pretty uneventful, really. I mean, we were just flying on a red-eye flight. He, again, because of my position...
Next question.
All right, sir. Mr. Balerie, as you watched Mr. Simpson from this vantage point, did you have occasion to look at his face?
I sure did.
Did you see any bruises or cuts or abrasions on his face at that point?
None whatsoever.
Did you have occasion, from this vantage point you described for us, to look at Mr. Simpson's hands?
I did.
And what, if anything, did you see with regard to his hands?
I viewed Mr. Simpson's hands specifically looking for a championship ring, given his fame as a professional football player. That was the motivation for my looking at his hands. I didn't see anything unusual, no Band-Aids, no large abrasions or anything to that effect.
Did you see any cuts at all?
I didn't see any.
See any blood on his hands?
No blood.
And by the way, you said you were looking for a championship ring. Is that like a Super Bowl ring?
Yes.
Some of that nature. And did you see one at that time?
No, I did not.
All right. And so you had a pretty clear, unobstructed view of Mr. Simpson as you were looking and making these observations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right.
His left hand would have been the hand I saw closest and best view of.
And I don't recall whether or not, did he ever take a book out of this bag that you were describing?
I saw the book out. I didn't actually see him take that out. I saw it out on the seat.
Right. And with regard to these papers that you say, the double-spaced papers that he was reading, could you tell what that was? I'm asking if you could tell. Could you tell what that was? You can answer that.
Yes. No, I could not tell what it was, no.
All right. But it was something he was apparently reading. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And what you've told us about now, did this take place during the first hour or so of the flight that you've described for us?
That's correct.
All right. And at some point, Mr. Balerie, did you go to sleep that night?
Yes.
All right. And at that time, is there anything else that you observed about Mr. Simpson that you haven't told us about during this hour period of time regarding how he appeared to you and his mood?
No, he, like I said, he glanced over occasionally and smiled in a friendly manner on a couple of occasions.
When he first got on the plane and you said he was interacting with other passengers, how would you describe him at that point when he first got on the plane?
Jovial. He came on like I said, shook hands with the gentleman behind me, and then another gentleman came up from the cabin class and greeted him and had a short word with him as well. Again, they seemed to know each other.
And the gentleman who came up from the cabin class, did you see him just go out of this courtroom a short time
That's
before
correct.
you came in? All right. So at some point, he went to sleep, is that correct? I mean, strike that. At some point, you went to sleep.
Yes, I did.
All right, and did you awaken prior to arriving in Chicago?
Yes,
And when you woke up, were you still able to see Mr. Simpson?
correct.
Do you know, did you ever at any point see the pilot, the captain of that plane, Wayne Stansfield, come out and interact with Mr. O.J. Simpson?
I did not witness that, no.
All right. And when you awaken, did you see Mr. Simpson?
Yes,
All right, was he where was he at that time?
seated in the same seat, 4D.
Okay, did you, what was he doing at the time you awakened?
Just preparing for landing, buckling seat belts and putting the seat forward and the like.
All right, you were getting close to landing at that point?
That's correct.
All right. And so then thereafter, the plane, of course, landed safely.
That's
Right?
correct.
You're at O'Hare Airport, right? Yes?
Yes.
All right. And then after you landed, can you describe for the jury who got up first to proceed out the door of that plane, and describe that for us?
We landed, taxied to the gate, and the first person to the front of the aisleway was Mr. Simpson, and I followed him directly afterwards. We were asked to wait just behind the door that they were going to open, obviously for safety reasons, and so Mr. Simpson stood in front of me, waiting to deplane.
All right. Now, as Mr. Simpson stood in front of you, did he have, if you recall, was he carrying any bags at this point?
Yeah, he had his garment bag over his right shoulder, which was the side I really couldn't see well. His left shoulder was to me, as we were going to deplane on the left side of the plane.
And was there a strap on that garment bag, if you recall?
Yes, it was over his shoulder.
Okay. What color was that bag?
It was a darker color. I didn't
All right.
really see. That was the one that he stowed overhead.
All right. That was over the right shoulder. And then what about did you see any other bag?
Yeah, and then the second bag that he had with him in the seat, and he had that positioned over his shoulder, carrying it with the two straps in his hand, hanging over his back, and that was closest to me.
All right. And for the record, the witness is indicating his left hand with the bag over his left shoulder.
Yes, thank you.
Is that correct? Thank you. And you indicated that was closest to you. And were you standing right behind Mr. Simpson?
Yes, I was.
And from that vantage point, could you see Mr. Simpson's left hand or part of his left hand?
I could have. I wasn't looking specifically at his hand at that point.
All right. Could you see his right hand at all?
No.
All right. So you were very close to him at this point, is that correct?
Yeah.
And did the two of you have any conversation or interaction at that point?
Yeah, we had I made a brief comment to him, which he smiled and I think in a groggy state acknowledged me.
All right. You seem groggy at this point.
Yeah, I think we were all pretty groggy at 4:30 in the morning.
All right. Plane was landing about 4:30.
Yeah.
All right. And at that point, what did you say, if anything?
I said to him, "You better be careful. Someone might think you're going to be doing a commercial."
And
The way his pose was, he looked like he was, and the fact that he was first to get off and looked like he was ready to get off that flight, I made that comment in jest.
All right. And did he say anything in response to that?
He smiled and indicated, "Yeah, I'm here to see Herz," or something to that effect. I didn't have a clear memory, really, of what he said back to me, because right at that moment, the door flew open and we were walking down, so I was just walking with him and thought I may even get another word with him. So I was pretty much close to him, walking out the gangway there and into the terminal, and then immediately he was greeted by a gentleman at the gate, where we both actually stopped to readjust our bags, and he shook hands with whoever greeted him and said hello and the like.
All right. So there was some gentleman met Mr. Simpson, and was that your last contact with him that day?
That's correct.
You didn't see him any further at that point?
We actually walked in tandem through the Chicago O'Hare terminal until he veered off to go to baggage claim. I was connecting on a flight to Washington, D.C.
So you're catching another flight, and your baggage was going through.
That's correct.
All right. And there was any other conversation between the two of you as you walked in tandem till he veered off?
None.
All right.
He was talking to the other gentleman.
All right, and there were three of you, basically. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, did you have occasion to talk with an investigator from the Los Angeles Police Department by the name of Crotsley on or about October 5th of 1994?
Yes, I did.
All right, and have you ever seen a copy of his report before today?
I saw it earlier this morning.
First time.
Yes.
And I'd like to approach Your Honor, just place it before him and ask the witness to read it. How much?
Or we'll, we can just show it to him at this point, see if he recognizes it.
Yes, I'd like to.
Or we'll,
Why don't you take a look at that report and see whether or not that refreshes your recollection or you recognize the words there on a conversation with an investigator by the name of Crotsley, C-R-O-T-S-L-E-Y.
oh, well, question was, do you recognize this document? Whether the content is hearsay is another issue.
Yes, I recognize this.
All right, do you recognize this from your conversation with Detective Crotsley?
It's a summary of the statements I made to the detective.
When you talked to the detective, were you trying to be as accurate as you could?
Yes, I was.
And was this a telephonic conversation?
Yes.
By the way, do you remember whether or not the detective read you some statement prior to talking to you that day? Did he read a statement?
That I had made earlier?
Yes.
He read some portion of it. He did not read an entire transcript. He was referring, I believe, to the shoes on that second occasion. So he wanted to just read how I described the shoes.
All right, and did you describe the shoes for this detective in October?
Yes.
And what was your description of the shoes?
My description was that they were leather, European-looking loafers with black or dark blue leather and the mesh leather in the front top panel of the shoe.
Appeared to be loafers of some kind.
Correct.
Did you have occasion to describe for the detective Mr. Simpson's appearance and his clothing?
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Did you have occasion during this conversation with Detective Crotsley to describe Mr. Simpson's appearance, how he appeared to you on that
Yeah,
evening?
it's the same general things I've said here today and I've said all along.
All right. We have just a second more, you know. This will be it, Your Honor. You had not seen Mr. Simpson that night at 11:15, had you? You had not seen him at 11:15 p.m. on that Sunday night, had you?
No, I had not.
You hadn't seen him at 11 o'clock that night, had you?
No, I had not.
Hadn't seen him at 10:45 that night, had you?
I had not seen him at 10:45.
You didn't
no.
see him until about 11:40 or thereabouts that night. Is that right?
That is correct.
That's what you told us about here today?
That is correct.
You've told us the truth here today?
Yes, I have.
Thank you very kindly for coming.
Mr. Darden? About 4 minutes. Do you want to start now, or do you want to start after lunch?
It's okay with you. I'd like to start
All All right, Mr. Valerie, I'm going to order you to come back then at 1:30, and we'll resume with your cross-examination by Mr. Darden. Ladies and gentlemen, please, you can step down now, Mr. Valerie. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess until 1:30, and we'll be in session today until 6. All right. All right, all parties are again present. All right, I'm sorry. Sure. McNair, let's have the jurors, please. Please be seated. All right, let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Valerie, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, good afternoon, Mr. Valerie. You're reminded, sir, you were still under oath. Mr. Darden.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Balerie.
Hello.
Sir, what do you do for a living?
Recent graduate of the Anderson Graduate School of Management at UCLA, and currently on vacation.
Okay, you were on vacation back in June of 1994, weren't you?
Just about to, yeah. I was studying in Georgetown on an executive program there for a month.
Okay, and in what city do you live?
I guess these days Irvine would be my address.
No, you don't, okay. Now, you, when you saw the defendant, you paid special attention to him, didn't you?
Did you say when I saw the defendant? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, didn't hear you. Yeah, I sure did.
Okay. And you don't usually look at everyone you meet as closely as you looked at the defendant, correct?
Depends on the circumstances.
Well, when you meet other people, we'll strike that. Well, when you see people in passing, do you look at them to see if they're sweating or not?
Sure.
So whenever you see someone, you look to see if they're sweating.
When I see someone, I look at them, and you might notice sweating, if that were the case.
Well, you testified this morning that you looked at Mr. Simpson specifically to see if he was sweating. Is that right?
And in this case, that's correct.
Okay. And you hadn't heard anything about Nicole Brown's murder at that point, right?
No?
You hadn't heard anything about Ron Goldman having been murdered at Bundy, right?
No.
Well, why did you look at Mr. Simpson to see if he was sweating?
Specifically because one of the few things I know about his celebrity is the fact that he did a commercial where he ran through an airport to catch his flight. And that is the reason why I specifically looked at Mr. Simpson, given that I expected I would be the last person to board that flight. I was using the telephone outside the gates and asked the attendant to let me know when the last possible moment for me to board was. So she waved over to me, and I got on. So I was startled when someone got on after me, especially someone that was a celebrity.
But to answer my question, Mr. Valerie, why did you look specifically at Mr. Simpson to see if he was sweating?
The specific reason was I imagined him having to probably run through the airport like his commercials, and imagined he would be sweating. It was a summer evening, it was warm, and I was heated, let's say. It's a warm plane the environment on airplanes warm. And I actually looked at him to see, wow, he must have been running through the airport, is what I imagined. So I was looking at him, and I actually noticed he looked very sharp.
Did you consciously think to yourself, wow, I wonder if O.J. Simpson is sweating?
Can you repeat that question?
I mean, did you actually think to yourself, I wonder if O.J. Simpson is sweating?
No, the thought that came across my mind was that he looked very fresh. I was surprised about that.
You spoke to a defense investigator on June 17, 1994. Is that correct?
I think that was a Thursday.
Okay, but you spoke to a defense investigator in June of 1994.
Yes.
Right. And you were shown a copy of a typewritten statement, your statement to that defense investigator. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Okay. You haven't seen a copy of your statement to defense investigator William Pavlik?
The defense investigator.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I did see it yesterday.
Okay. And who showed that statement to you?
Johnnie Cochran.
Okay. And where were you when Johnnie Cochran showed you that statement?
In his office.
Okay. And that was yesterday evening?
That's correct.
Okay. And what time was that?
Approximately 8:45 p.m.
Okay. And how long had you been at Mr. Cochran's office yesterday evening?
I'd been there probably 40 minutes.
Okay. And how'd you get there?
I drove myself there.
Okay. And when Mr. Cochran showed you that statement, did you read it?
Actually, I didn't. I glanced at it, but I didn't bother to read it.
Let me hand you a single-page document and ask you if that is a copy of the statement Mr. Cochran showed you.
It appears to be, yes.
Did you indicate to the defense investigator? We'll strike that. Where in that statement to the defense investigator does it state that you looked at Mr. Simpson for the specific purpose of determining whether or not he was sweating?
Sustained. Phrase the question.
Okay. Well, when you spoke to the defense investigator, did you try to be honest?
This is a summary of what I said. It's not the actual transcript. We spoke for, my estimates were probably about 45 minutes. So if that's all that was written, then I would imagine it would have been much longer for that much time.
Okay, well, is it your testimony that you told Mr. Pavlik that you looked at Mr. Simpson specifically to see if he was sweating?
Yes, that is correct.
And is that contained in the statement here?
No, it is not.
When you looked at this statement yesterday with Mr. Cochran, you pointed that out to him, I take it?
No, I didn't. Like I said, I didn't read that statement. They just said these were what were taken from you. I glanced at them. I noticed the key points and moved on.
I'm sorry, with Johnnie?
That is correct.
Okay, you're Mr. Cochran on the first name basis?
And Carl was there.
Carl Douglas?
That's correct.
Okay, so you refer to Mr. Cochran as Johnnie and Mr. Douglas as Carl?
That's how they asked me to refer to them. I said they can call me Steve.
And you spoke to Mr. Pavlik, the defense investigator, on June 23. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you speak to Mr. Pavlik, the defense investigator, in person?
No, it was via telephone.
And how long did you speak to Mr. Pavlik at that time?
Again, I'm not clear on the dates. You said the 23rd. What day was that? Was that the same conversation as that record has? Is it that conversation you're referring to?
Well, the first piece of paper I showed you shows the date of June 17. Is
June
that correct?
17th. Okay.
Okay. That was the first time you spoke to Mr. Pavlik?
That's correct.
Okay. And you spoke to him again on the telephone. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
You spoke to him about 6 days after the first conversation, correct?
Okay.
Okay. About June 23, 1994?
I don't remember the specific date. Yes, I had a second conversation with him.
Okay. And you didn't tell Mr. Pavlik anything about looking at O.J. Simpson specifically to see if he was sweating or not, did you?
Frankly, I don't remember what the second specific conversation was about. If it was any different than the first time, I think all the way through this, I've stated the exact same facts. And so I think he asked me questions again in more detail, but I certainly don't remember a year later what the second conversation was verbatim.
And you actually spoke to the LAPD, a detective from the LAPD, on June 16, 1994, correct?
I think that's correct.
Okay, you
Again, I
spoke-
don't have a calendar in front of me, so.
Okay, well, you spoke to Detective Kilcoyne?
Yes, I called him, in fact.
And why did you call Detective Kilcoyne?
Because by that time it had come out that Mr. Simpson was implicated or had some possible connection to the case, and so I wanted to let it be known that he was on board this flight. I wasn't sure if that had been communicated to anybody, so I had called up, and they passed me on to this detective. I didn't know his name at the time.
Okay, you wanted to make sure the LAPD had all the information you had
Correct.
relative to Mr. Simpson on the flight to Chicago from LAX, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And did did Johnnie and Carl show you a copy of an LAPD statement yesterday?
Yes, one statement, because I made two,
Okay.
and they showed me one.
Okay. And the one statement that they showed you, was it a handwritten
That is correct.
copy of a statement? Yes?
Yes.
And this contains the information you gave the LAPD on June 16, right?
Correct.
Okay.
A
And,
summary again.
okay. And where, in the statement, if at all, does it show that you told the LAPD that you looked at Mr. Simpson for the specific purpose of trying to find out or see whether or not he was sweating?
Sustain or phrase the question.
Well, you told the detectives everything you knew and saw, right?
That's correct, and that is not, everything I knew and saw is not contained in this handwritten, photocopied document.
Okay, you didn't tell the detective that Mr. Simpson was sweating when you saw him, did you?
Yes, I did.
You did?
No, I'm sorry, I did. I said he wasn't sweating, is what my statement was.
Okay. Where does this, well, strike that. You told the detective that Mr. Simpson was not sweating.
I said, the wording I used was he looked very calm, cool, and collected. His clothes were very freshly pressed and looked very well kept and entered the flight.
Okay.
I noticed no sweat.
And then you added on at the end, I noticed no sweat.
You probably have the tape recorded statement, so if you want to pull that up, I'm happy to go through it with you. This is not, though, a copy of what I said. This is someone's summary in about a paragraph.
Okay. What tape recorded statement?
I was talking to the police investigator. There was a beeping sound, so something was on tape, I assume.
Balerie, when you spoke to the LAPD on June 16, and when you spoke to Mr. Pavlik on June 17 and also on June 23, 1994, you didn't tell him anything about a garment bag, did you?
Did I tell them anything about a garment
Yeah.
bag?
Did you tell Mr. Pavlik about seeing the defendant with a garment bag?
We didn't really discuss, how do we say this? We discussed the bag that was in full view. He put a bag originally on the
Okay,
flight.
I'm sorry, but the question is, did you discuss with Mr. Pavlik on June 17 anything about a garment bag?
I think so. I don't remember.
Okay.
It's a year ago.
Is that contained in the statement prepared by the defense investigator dated June 17?
If you want to bring that here, I'll see if it says that. I don't remember. In this statement, it just talks about the
The question is there anything in the statement about a garment bag?
Overruled.
In this summary that I have before me, it does not mention the garment bag.
And in the June 23 conversation you had with Mr. Pavlik, you didn't mention anything to him about a garment bag, did you?
Again, I believe I did mention it. Yes.
All right. Have you seen Mr. Pavlik's report dated June 23, 1994?
Yes, I saw it. I didn't read it verbatim.
Okay, you saw it when?
But last night, I believe.
Is a copy of it?
No, this I haven't seen before.
Is that a single-page document dated June 23, 1994?
Yes, it is.
And does it bear the name William Pavlik at the top?
That's correct.
Is your name on that document?
Yes, it is.
Is there any mention in that document of your having told Mr. Pavlik that day about a garment bag?
Rephrase the question.
Is the term garment bag mentioned in that document?
No.
How about duffel bag?
How about any bag?
Okay. How about the word sweat?
It has not. This document has nothing describing the flight at all.
Okay.
This
And
is something
okay.
else.
And in fact, that document addresses the fact that he spoke to you on June 17, doesn't it?
Correct.
Does that document say anything about any amendments to your June 17 statement?
It does not.
Does it clarify at all your June 17 statement?
It does not.
And when you spoke to the LAPD on June 16, you didn't mention anything about garment bags, did you?
That's the answer, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Did you?
Can you repeat the question?
You didn't mention anything to the LAPD on June 16 about garment bags, did you?
I believe I did when I described when he came on, but it wasn't central to the fact that I wasn't bag counting. The bag issue came up relative to what I saw him do with the bag he had available to him.
Mr. Valerie, did you mention anything to the LAPD about garment bags on June 16? Yes or no?
I don't remember.
Is there anything contained in the June 16 LAPD statement, which is before you, that mentions a garment bag?
Sustained.
The first time you mentioned anything about the defendant having sweat or not having any sweat on him was on October 5. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Who did you tell about that? Who did you talk to about the defendant not having any sweat on him? First.
Overruled.
It's to everyone I've spoken to, both the police investigator and Bill Pavlik.
Well, if you told Mr. Pavlik about that, do you know why it's not contained in either of those two defense investigators?
Sustained.
At any event, Mr. Balerie, when you got on the airplane, Mr. Simpson came on after you did. Is that correct?
He came on after me, that's correct.
You paid particular attention to him, right?
I did, yes.
Okay. You looked at his hair, did you?
Sure.
Yes.
I did.
Looked at his face,
Absolutely.
and you paid particular attention to his hair and his face, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Was there something about Mr. Simpson's hair that intrigued you that night?
Overruled. You can answer the question.
No more than anybody else's hair.
Okay. Or everybody else's hair. And you looked at his hand, right?
Later on in the flight, yes.
Okay. Are you a football fan?
Marginally.
You follow football?
Not really.
And why did you look
watch
at?
an occasional game.
Okay. And why did you look at Mr. Simpson's hand later on in the flight?
I was looking specifically for a championship ring.
Did you know at that time that Mr. Simpson has never won an NFL championship?
I did not know at that time.
You testified this morning that at some point during the flight that you turned to your right and put your feet up in the chair?
Over to so it crossed over into the front of the seat next to me.
Okay. And prior to that, you had placed your feet on the footrest?
Well, prior to that was takeoff, and the footrest isn't allowed to be up, so my feet were placed on the floor in front of me.
Did you tell Mr. Pavlik on June 17 that you had turned to your right to look at the defendant during the flight?
Yes.
Is that contained in a statement there dated June 17?
No, it's not. No, it is not.
And is it contained in that statement dated June 23?
No, it is not.
And is that contained in the report from the LAPD dated June 16, 1994?
No, it is not.
And you did speak to Detective Crotsley from the LAPD on October 5, 1994, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you saw that report over lunch today?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's not contained in that report either, is it?
Again, I didn't read it in full detail. It didn't appear to me.
So was today the first time that you've ever told anyone, Mr. Balerie, that you turned to your right to face the defendant during the flight?
No, it is not.
You told us this morning that you remained awake on the airplane for approximately 1 hour. Is that correct?
That's an estimate. I'd say between, it could have even been a little bit longer than that. And I woke up also later, once or twice during the flight.
So the only opportunity you had to see and view the defendant during the flight was during that first hour. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But you told Mr. Pavlik on June 17 that you looked at Mr. Simpson throughout the flight. Is that correct?
Again, the exact wording, I don't particularly remember.
Refresh your recollection to look at Mr. Pavlik's statement dated June 17?
No, because that is only a summary, like I've said throughout this. This is not any quotes of what I've said here.
Well, direct your attention to paragraph 3 of that statement dated June 17. Doesn't that statement indicate, or rather state, that you watched Mr. Simpson throughout the flight?
Oral.
Mr. Balerie.
The word used here was Mr. Simpson. Mr. Valerie stated that he looked at Mr. Simpson throughout the flight because of his prominence. What that statement probably represents is the fact that throughout the flight, during the periodic periods when I woke up, I looked over and viewed him. If that's not what's communicated there, that's what indeed was meant by that.
The statement doesn't indicate that you looked at Mr. Simpson periodically during the flight, does it?
Does not.
The statement says, quote, Mr. Valerie stated that he looked at Mr. Simpson throughout the flight because of his prominence, unquote. Is that correct?
Oral.
Is that correct?
The quote you're citing is from that document. That is not a quote that's attributable to me. That is a summary.
And you told us this morning that during that 1 hour period that you saw the defendant reading something?
That is correct.
Okay. And did you watch the defendant read throughout the entire flight?
In the moments that I watched him, I viewed him reading the document.
You just read this June 17 statement again, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
And would you agree that this statement is inconsistent with what you've just told us here in court?
Sustained. Phrase the question.
Mr. Valerie, doesn't the statement state at paragraph 4, quote, Mr. Valerie stated that throughout the flight, Mr. Simpson was reading documents which he removed from a black duffel bag, unquote. Did I read that accurately?
Yes, I guess you did.
Was the defendant reading during that entire flight, Mr. Balerie?
I can only attest to what I viewed during the flight and during my observations of him, other than the moments I saw him before takeoff and upon landing. My views of him were reading the document. At least he was looking at it. I didn't notice if he was reading. I mean, I don't really know if he was reading or not, right?
Okay. Well, this morning you testified that he was reading.
Sustained.
But did you testify this morning, sir, that he was reading?
His pose appeared to be reading, and that's what I would be doing if I were looking at a document.
And you told us this morning that you couldn't tell exactly what the document was. Is that correct?
In terms of the subject of the document,
In terms of the identification?
I think I described it in pretty good detail.
Okay.
Other than the subject of the document, I described what I saw.
But what was the subject of the document?
I don't know.
Didn't you tell Mr. Pavlik that the document was a movie script?
I said it was double-spaced, typed on white 8.5 by 11 paper, and the documents I've seen that are double-spaced like that appear to be, I actually said a legal document, okay? And he said, or potentially it could have been a script. I said, yeah, or something like that.
So you told Mr. Pavlik that the defendant was reading a movie script?
No, I did not. And he interjected that. Could it have been a movie script? I said, yes, it was some document. All I described and attested to was the fact that it was a double-spaced, typed document on 8.5 by 11 loose-leaf paper.
Well, doesn't this statement dated June 17, 1994 state, Mr. Valerie opined that O.J. was reading a movie script?
That,
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Is that the complete statement in the
Okay. The statement states, Your Honor, quote, Mr. Valerie opined that O.J. was reading a movie script, ... and he could see that the document was written in a double-spaced format, unquote. Is that what the statement says?
that's what the statement says, and that is inconsistent with what I said.
Okay. Well, did you read a portion of that document? Did you yourself read a portion of the document? You say that Mr. Simpson...
No, I could not read the document or its subject content.
Were you close enough to read it?
No, I was close enough to describe what I've described to you.
Now, you were seated on one side of the plane and Mr. Simpson was seated on the other side. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And after the plane took off, did the pilot lower the cabin lights?
The main cabin lights, that's correct.
Okay. And the first class passenger area was relatively dark or dim?
Other than Mr. Simpson's light illuminating him and his seat.
Okay. But you weren't close enough to read the document. Okay.
Sustained.
Well, thank you, Your Honor. During your June 16, 1994 interview with Detective Kilcoyne, didn't you tell him that you were close enough to read Simpson's script or contract, which he read throughout the trip?
No, I did not.
Showing you again is June 16, 1994, handwritten LAPD report. Is that indicated in the report? The report is down at the bottom of the page.
It's stated he was close enough to read Simpson's script or contract. That's what is worded here. What is implied is that I was able to make out that it was some kind of document, script, or contract. And if that's not what is understood from this secondhand document, I'll make it clear that that's what is my testimony.
By the way, is there anything in either of the three documents that I've handed you, the June 23 and June 17 documents from William Pavlik, the defense investigator, the LAPD report by Detective Kilcoyne, is there anything in those documents that indicates that they are summaries of conversations that those persons had with you?
Oral. You can answer the question.
Not that I see here, no.
Okay. Now, you were kept in a room upstairs on the 19th floor, is that right? Today?
When?
Today.
No, I went up there and just had something to eat, and I've been down here in the hallway.
They have food up there?
They do.
And were you in that room along with Michael Gladden?
I don't know. I don't know who Michael Gladden is.
Were you in that room with other persons who have testified today for the defense and who are waiting to testify?
Other than Howard Bingham, who I recognized from the flight, and also the gentleman who sat behind me, Gary Adelson is up there. I don't know him. I recognize those two, but I don't know them, and they were up in the room. In fact, they were up in another room. I didn't sit with them. I sat and had something to eat and a cup of coffee out in a common area table.
The shoes that you saw Mr. Simpson wearing that night, they weren't boots, were they?
No.
And they weren't tan in color, were they?
No, they were not.
Okay. By the way, did you ever have a discussion with Mr. Gladden, with Michael Gladden, regarding his description of the shoes the defendant wore that night?
As I just stated before, I don't know who Michael Gladden is.
The shoes you saw the defendant wearing that night were loafers, weren't they?
That is correct.
And they were black, weren't they?
My recollection is black or dark blue.
And when you testified this morning, you said that those black or dark blue loafers were European. Is that correct?
I said they appeared European.
But when you spoke to Detective Crotsley on October 5, 1994, you said that those black or blue loafers were Italian loafers, didn't you?
Italian style, that's correct. That's the word I used back then.
Is there some reason that today you use the word European as opposed to Italian?
Just trying to be more precise to help you out.
Well, you mean to help Johnnie and Carl out, don't you?
Sustained.
I didn't get a good chance to...
Hold on. There's no question pending.
Did you have a good opportunity to see the shoes the defendant wore that night?
Can you repeat the question?
I said, were you given a fair opportunity to see the shoes that the defendant wore that night?
Yeah, quite a good amount, yes.
Did you look at the defendant's shoes as carefully as you looked at his face and his hair and his clothing?
Yes,
You looked at his feet?
I did.
You paid particular attention to the defendant's feet?
Yes, I did.
And why did you do that?
Because I noticed the shoes, and I noticed he wasn't wearing socks with the shoes. That's what my recollection of that evening was. It was just an observation along with all the other observations I made.
I'm sorry, did you say the defendant wasn't wearing socks?
That's correct.
How do you know that?
Because my eyesight is good and with corrected vision, and as I know you're wearing a blue suit, he was wearing no socks.
Did you think that was odd or unusual?
Absolutely not. It fit the decor of what he was wearing.
Well, if you didn't consider that odd or unusual, why then did you pay attention to that fact?
As I paid attention to everything else that evening.
I assume that you approved of the clothing the defendant wore. I mean,
Sustained, it is.
I'm sorry, what kind of pants did you say the defendant was wearing?
Cotton pants. Not denim, brushed cotton or something. I'm not specific on the apparel terminology.
Oh, the pants weren't denim?
No, that's actually not jeans anyway.
They weren't jeans?
They were not jeans.
They weren't Levi's?
Levi's is a brand. I don't know what brand they were.
You told us this morning that that the defendant was given some water by the flight attendant. Is that
That's
correct?
Had ice in it.
I'm sorry?
Had some ice in it.
You saw the defendant, I'm sorry, you saw the flight attendant retrieve some water and bring it to the defendant?
That's correct.
Okay, and when was that exactly?
My recollection of that was actually right before takeoff. But I worded it recollection because it could have been right after takeoff. The timing of that I don't really know, but I did notice he had a water very certainly within the first 15 minutes of that flight.
And when you saw the flight attendant bring the defendant some water, did she bring him that water in a cup or a glass?
It was a small clear plastic cup.
And after the flight attendant brought the defendant that water in that clear plastic cup, did you see her return with a bottle of water?
No, I did not. Or I didn't notice it.
You didn't notice that?
No, she also served me a drink, so, I mean, I wasn't really paying attention to who was ordering what drink after flight.
Didn't you see the flight attendant bring Mr. Simpson water on 3 or 4 occasions?
I didn't witness 3 or 4 occasions, no.
Do you recall the flight attendant's name?
No.
Did she tell you her name?
I've never met her, other than that flight, but I know I've never seen her. I don't know her name. I wouldn't even be able to pick her out.
And then again, you slept most of the flight, is that correct?
Of the 3.5-hour flight, I slept probably about, I would say 2 hours, maximum 2.5 hours. But not in a consistent sleep. It was on and off.
And during those moments that you were awake, which must have been, what, an hour to hour and a half? Mm-hmm. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were you looking at the defendant throughout that hour or 1.5 hour period?
My most intense observations of Mr. Simpson were in the first hour. After that, I mean, things really didn't change much from my perspective, in that I saw what he looked like, saw what he wore, and made the observations that I've stated to you and the police investigators.
Okay. So your observations we'll strike that. You would describe your observations of the defendant as intense observations, is that right?
As what type of observation?
Intense.
Intense.
Yes.
Relative to how I may observe some other not as famous individual, I would say yes.
Okay. Now, did you see the defendant go to the restroom?
I only saw him go once.
Okay. You didn't see the defendant go to the restroom 4 or 5 times during the flight?
I did not see him. I stated I saw him once get up to go to the bathroom.
Did you ever see the defendant retrieve a pair of socks and put them on?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see him change his clothes at all?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see the defendant change from tan boots to black or blue Italian loafers?
No, I did not.
Has anyone shown you a pair of Italian loafers?
No, they have not.
Mr. Cochran and Mr. Douglas didn't show you a pair?
They did not.
When you went to sleep, Mr. Simpson was still awake, is that correct?
That is correct.
And when you woke up, Mr. Simpson was still awake, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what time did that plane land in Chicago, Pacific time?
Again, I've been told 4:35. I don't recall exactly. And 4:35, I guess that would be Chicago time. But again, I wasn't paying particular attention to the time at that point.
And Chicago is 2 hours ahead of us here in Los Angeles.
Still is. Thank you, Mr. Darden.
With regard to not wearing socks, you went to UCLA for how long? A couple of years?
2 years, business school.
It's fairly common to see people who hang out on the west side wear casual clothes with no socks on and loafers.
Fairly common, yes.
See that a lot at UCLA, don't you? In Westwood.
You see it generally, I think, all over the area.
Not only in California and other states also.
I guess it depends on the weather. It was summertime. It was warm.
Now, you have talked to either defense investigators or the police on at least 4 occasions that you've been asked about here today. Is that correct?
Yes, two police investigators and twice with Mr. Pavlik.
And let's I want to make sure of the chronology. As I understand it, the first authorities that you spoke to in this case were to the LAPD, Detective Kilcoyne, before you ever talked to any defense investigators. Isn't that right?
That actually is not correct.
Okay, who'd you talk to first, as far as authority?
I phoned up the very next, it would have been Tuesday morning, Washington, D.C. time, probably about 7 a.m., so it would have been placed at 4 a.m. or so in Los Angeles. I phoned up to let someone know at the LAPD that I indeed sat next to Mr. Simpson that flight and that he was in Chicago, to let them know that. I wasn't where I was living, didn't have a TV, I didn't have a lot of access to information, just heard the news secondhand and made that phone call.
Sorry.
Yeah, the person who answered the phone said, you know, I should call back at another time, that no one really was around to take the information. There was no investigator, and gave me a number to call back. So that was my first contact.
So the first call was in on the 14th, is that right? Or was that the 13th?
Tuesday, whatever that Tuesday was.
All right, that Tuesday will be the 14th, okay? And what you were doing, you were calling the police to try and assist them in case they didn't know where Mr. Simpson was, is that right?
That's correct.
It is.
Oh, but
It is.
I'll ask another way. You're right. Why were you calling the police on Tuesday the 14th?
To forward information to the fact that I was with Mr. Simpson on a flight and give them that information.
All right, and then thereafter, you had occasion to speak to a police officer by the name of Kilcoyne, and that was on the 16th, is that correct?
That is correct. And
And-
I phoned him.
You called him also, right? And
Yes.
as I understand it, the statement that you gave Detective Kilcoyne, and may I approach you with all these statements?
Can I get my copy, Johnnie?
Yes.
Sure, correct. Now I can approach. With regard to these statements, and we'll do this quickly, Your Honor. With regard to Detective Kilcoyne, you gave this statement on or about June 16th, 1994, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in all the statements that you've given in this case, have you been consistent with what you've told this jury here today?
That is correct. I've been
And,
very consistent.
all right. And with regard, sir, to the statement written up by Cochran, this was a telephonic interview, is that correct?
That is correct.
He didn't send you a copy of this statement, did he?
No, he did not.
And is this statement that council's been referring to, the June 16th statement, is that a complete and verbatim transcript of what you said to him at that time?
No, it is definitely not.
All right. And when you talked with Mr. Pavlik on June 17th, the second statement, which is kind of in letter form, is that statement a correct and verbatim copy of what you said to Mr. Pavlik at that time?
No, it is not. It is a summary.
All right. These are summaries, both are summaries. And then council was referring to a statement of June 23rd, 94, which, what is that? Why don't you look at it and see what that is? Is that a statement at all, or what is that?
It refers to the second conversation I had when the press found out who I was, and I wanted to ask to see if I was breaking any rules of the court or any other laws by making a statement to the press. It was in particular relation to what had been publicly broadcast about the flight attendant saying he had his hand in his bag.
Sustained.
Well, at any rate, this is...
Excuse me. Curious to disregard that comment. That last comment.
Okay. With regard to this June 23rd statement, it's addressed to somebody named Bonnie, isn't it?
That is correct, Bonnie Barron.
It's not even addressed to you, is it?
Nope.
All right. Now, in fact, on that statement, at the top part, it says from, to, subject, date. You're not even mentioned at the top, are you?
No, I'm only mentioned in the text.
All right. And again, that is basically a letter to Bonnie, right?
That is correct.
Now, the final statement from Detective Crotsley, taken from you on October 5th, 1994. Look at that statement and see whether or not that's a verbatim statement of what you said to Detective Crotsley.
I spoke with Detective Crotsley probably 35 or 40 minutes, and this has probably about 40 total words in this thing. So I'd be speaking very slow if this were the verbatim document.
So that's not the whole, that's a summary again, is that right?
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned that you had some concern about violating the court's rules. Have you been offered money to testify in this case?
Yes, I have, on a number of occasions.
On how many occasions have you been offered money?
3 specific times.
And how much, by whom were you offered money the first time?
By whom?
Yes, which
individual or company?
No, which
or
company?
Television show? I don't remember the order. The 3 companies were Current Affair, Hard Copy, and Inside Edition.
Let's take them in reverse.
Alphabetical order.
Yes, I was going to say in order of their terribleness, but I won't say that. Let's take them in, as the court says, in alphabetical order. And I guess that would be Current Affair?
Current Affair, $10,000.
And let's see. The next one will be Hard Copy. How much do they offer you?
$6,000.
The last would be is an Inside Edition.
That's correct.
How much do they offer you?
$3,000.
Did you take any money from any of those people at all?
I did not.
You did not sold your story at all in this case. Is that correct, sir?
I did not.
And why didn't you sell your story in this case?
I didn't feel it was appropriate in that I expected I might be a witness in this case, and didn't think it's very good to compromise the story. Someone might think that you tainted the story to get a sum of money.
Have you come here and told us the truth today?
Yes, I have.
Thank you very kindly for coming.
Mr. Darden, anything further? All right, Mr. Balerie, thank you very much, sir. You're excused.
Calls James Merrill, stand.
All right, Mr. Merrill. Would you come forward, please? Stand over next to Mr. Douglas. Please face Mrs. Robertson, the clerk.
Raise your hand, please. You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the Cochran meeting before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat and witness stand and state and spell your first and last names for the record.
Jim Merrill.
May we have the spelling, please?
Jim, J-I-M. Merrill, M-E-R-R-I-L-L.
Thank you.
Mr. Merrill, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sir, what is your occupation?
Work for the Hertz Corporation.
And, sir, how long have you worked for Hertz?
Just under 2 years.
What do you do for Hertz, sir?
I'm in the corporate sales department, sales representative.
Excuse me, Mr. Merrill, would you pull the microphone a little close to you there?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Your Honor. And, Mr. Merrill, is it the practice of Hertz Corporation to hold a function each year?
Yes, it is.
What sort of function is that?
We like to have golf outings once a year.
Was such a function held this year?
Yes, it was.
When was that?
That was this prior Monday. That's where I got the sunburn.
Was that golf tournament held last year?
Yes, it was.
What was the date of the tournament?
June 13th.
At the golf tournament, what sorts of people does Hertz introduce or bring forward?
Typically, what we'd like to do is bring a celebrity to help entertain the clients that we do have in town for the golf outing.
And what sorts of clients come for the festival?
People who have a purchasing decision within the companies that we do business with.
What role, sir, did you play last year with that golf tournament?
Last year, I was asked to pick up Mr. Simpson at the airport when he flew in that morning.
When did you first learn, sir, that Mr. Simpson would be coming to Chicago?
Approximately a month before he came into town.
And, sir, what sort of arrangements did you make to pick him up?
I personally didn't make the arrangements. Those were made by Casey Thomasine back at my office.
Did there come a time, sir, when you were involved with actually picking him up?
Yes, there was.
What was occurring in that regard?
I was to pick up a Lincoln Town car in the morning and go over to the airport and pick him up at the gate.
And did you do so?
Yes, I did.
Were you with anyone?
Yes, I was.
Whom else were you with?
Bombay Shaw.
And what role did you play in that process, and what role did Mr. Shaw play?
My role was to meet Mr. Simpson at the gate and escort him to the car and then to the hotel. Mr. Shaw's role was to watch my car as I was meeting Mr. Simpson at the gate.
And what time, sir, did the flight come in?
Flight came in at 5:34.
That's Chicago time?
That's Chicago time.
And did you go to the gate?
Yes, I did.
Did you have occasion to meet Mr. Simpson?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe for me his demeanor when he came off of the airplane?
Very relaxed, looked a little tired, happy, friendly, cordial.
Was he carrying any luggage?
Yes, he was.
How many pieces?
He had 2 pieces.
Can you describe the 2 pieces for me, please?
He had a black garment bag and a black duffel bag.
Mr. Merrill, looking first at a document, at a bag that's Exhibit 1065.
Mhm.
Do you recognize this, sir?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize it?
The initials on the front of the bag.
The OJS?
The OJS.
And
Correct.
does that appear to be similar to the garment bag that you saw him with on that day?
Yes.
Looking at what is marked as Exhibit 1064, do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
That is a black duffel bag?
And does it appear to be consistent with the bag that you saw him carrying that day?
Yes, it does.
When you first met Mr. Simpson, did you shake his hand?
Yes.
And What did you and he then do?
At that point, we proceeded down to the baggage claim area.
When you got to the baggage claim area, what did you do there?
There, we sat down on a bench, conversed, and waited for the bags to arrive.
While you were waiting for the bags to arrive, did anything happen?
Yes. Many people were coming out of coming down the hallway which we were in, and conversing with Mr. Simpson, shaking hands, asking for autographs.
You saw people coming down and introducing themselves to Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
You say they were shaking his hands?
Yes.
They were asking for autographs?
Yes.
Was he complying?
Yes, he was.
What was his demeanor when he was doing that?
Again, very cordial, happy.
Would you estimate the number of people who came and interacted with Mr. Simpson that morning while waiting for the luggage?
A good estimate would be 15 to 20.
And you were nearby while he interacted with all of them?
I was right next to him.
Was there anything unusual about the manner in which he interacted with those people?
None.
Did there come a time, sir, when Mr. Simpson's bags arrived on the baggage carousel?
Yes.
And what happened then?
Mr. Simpson stood up to go get his golf bag, and I grabbed the garment bag and the duffel bag and followed him.
And where did he place the withdrawn? Was Mr. Shaw in a car waiting somewhere close by?
Yes, he was.
And what occurred then?
Well, he picked up his bag from the carousel. We proceeded out the door and to the car, where Mr. Shaw was waiting.
And what, if anything, happened to the golf bag?
The golf bag was placed in the back of the town car.
And what, if anything, happened to the other bags?
The other bags were placed in the back seat of the town car.
Did Mr. Shaw go with you on your travel, leaving the airport?
No, he did not.
What did he do?
Mr. Shaw took the Hertz bus back to the Hertz operations.
Did you then drive Mr. Simpson?
Excuse me?
Did you then drive Mr. Simpson?
Yes, I did.
And where was he seated?
Mr. Simpson was seated to my right in the front seat.
Now, did O'Hare make arrangements for the lodging of guests who were attending the golf festival on June the 13th?
Yes.
And what hotel was Mr. Simpson scheduled to stay at?
It was Howard Johnson O'Hare Plaza Hotel.
And how far of a distance was the hotel from the airport?
Not far, within 5 miles.
What was the driving time on that morning?
Approximately, I would say 7 to 10 minutes.
While you and he were driving in your car, did he ever have occasion to ask you to put on the news?
No, he did not.
Were you listening to anything on the radio?
I had a radio station on. I don't recall what it was. It was a music station.
During the course of you and he driving together to the to the hotel, what did you and he do?
Oh, we were talking about how bad the weather was. It was raining, and we were concerned about the fact that we may not be able to play golf that afternoon. We discussed. We
Sustained.
Did you and he discuss arrangements for his travel to the actual tournament later that morning?
Yes, we did.
Was there a discussion as to what would be done with the golf bag that was then in the trunk?
No, there was not.
Upon arriving at the at the hotel, what happened then?
When we pulled up to the hotel, I parked the car in front. We exited the car, and Mr. Simpson took his bags, this bag and the duffel bag, and the golf club stayed in the trunk. We entered the hotel and went up to the reception desk, and
If he was coming for the golf tournament, why were the golf clubs remaining in the trunk of your car with his checking into the hotel?
because we were going to be getting together to play golf later that morning.
Were you going to be taking him from the hotel to the golf tournament?
Yes.
Did he express any hesitance with leaving the golf clubs inside your trunk when you drove away?
None. No.
Did he suggest that you should not open the trunk or go into the bag?
No.
Objection, that's hearsay.
Answer stricken, jurors to disregard.
What happened when you walked into the hotel?
We walked up to the reception area, or the front desk, and Mr. Simpson was being checked in, and there was a couple of people that also asked for autographs, if I remember correctly.
And did he comply?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
What happened next?
After that, I wrote down my cellular number and my home phone number on my business card, handed it to Mr. Simpson. We both talked about how we were hoping that the weather would become nicer, and walked him to the elevator, shook hands, and discussed about getting back together later that morning.
Did you see Mr. Simpson any more that day after he got into the elevator?
No, I did not.
Now, you had a chance to see Mr. Simpson when he first came off of the airplane.
Yes.
You had a chance to see him for the time while you waited for the bags to come.
Yes.
About how much time did it take for the bags to come, did you say?
Approximately 10 minutes.
You had a chance to see Mr. Simpson while you and he were inside your car traveling to his hotel.
Yes.
You had a chance to see Mr. Simpson while he interacted with...
Objection, this is all leading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you have a chance to see Mr. Simpson as he interacted with the guests at the hotel?
Yes, I did.
During the entire time that you interacted with Mr. Simpson that morning, did you notice anything unusual about his hands?
No, I did not.
Did you notice any cuts on the middle finger of his left hand?
No.
I want to show you a photograph that is People's Exhibit 123, and you can look on the monitor to your right.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Objection, Your Honor. Objection.
What's the objection?
This photograph is irrelevant for the time frame posed.
Which exhibit is this?
123, Your Honor.
Photograph taken June 13th in the afternoon.
Overruled. Mr. Merrill?
Looking at the picture that is Exhibit 123 shown on the monitor there, do you see what appears to be some sort of mark on Mr. Simpson's finger?
Yes.
During the time that you saw Mr. Simpson when he came off of the airplane, at baggage claim, and in the car, and in the hotel, did you have occasion to see such a mark on his finger?
No.
Now, thank you. When Mr. Simpson picked up his bags, you say that he personally picked up a golf bag.
Yes.
You picked up the garment bag and the duffel bag.
Yes.
Do you have occasion to recall whether or not there was another garment bag, like a Louis Vuitton bag?
I don't recall.
There could have been, but you didn't notice?
I didn't notice, no.
After seeing Mr. Simpson into the elevator at the hotel, did you have occasion to talk with him again?
Yes.
And approximately what time that morning did you talk to him again?
8:25.
And how did he contact you?
He contacted me by my cellular phone.
Now, have you been kind enough to bring your cellular phone records with you from Chicago?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to have marked as the defendant's next in order a 2-page document from Cellular 1.
1246.
I've shown it to counsel. Exhibit
1246.
1246. Do you recognize that exhibit, sir?
Yes, I do.
And what is that exhibit?
That's my Cellular One phone bill.
And for what dates are shown?
From June 9th through June 22nd.
And do you see on there any notations for incoming calls that may have been received on June the 13th?
Yes,
And what is the time of the first incoming call?
8:25 a.m.
Now, did you receive any phone calls on your cellular phone that morning before the call to Mr. Simpson?
No,
When Mr. Simpson called you at 8:25, can you say something about what his demeanor was?
he was very desperate. He sounded very upset, confused, very frantic.
And did he have any request of you?
Oh, yeah, he wanted me to come pick him up as quickly as I could.
Now, sir, just so that we have some time frame in mind, how much time had passed between your seeing him in the elevator and your receiving the call?
Approximately 2 hours.
How long did that first telephone call last?
About 15 seconds.
And was there an occasion for him to call you again?
Yes, there was.
How much time passed between the first time that he called and the second time?
7 minutes.
7 minutes?
7 minutes.
And, sir, what occurred during the second phone call?
He was asking me where I was.
Objection, hearsay.
Subsequent conduct, Your Honor, only, not for the truth.
Your Honor,
No, that's asking where you were doesn't do that. Sustain. Jury's to disregard.
How far away from the Chicago Plaza Hotel were you when you received the first call?
About 20 to 25 miles.
And between how much driving time was that?
Depending on traffic, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour.
And between the first call that you received and the second call, had you made arrangements to return to the hotel?
Yes, I was in my car.
How long did the conversation last for the second call?
Again, it was very quick, probably less than 30 seconds.
And can you describe his demeanor then?
Yes, again, it was very, very hurried, very frantic, confused, desperate.
Did there come a time that he called you a third time?
Yes,
And what time was that third call?
2 minutes later.
And what was his demeanor during the third call?
The third call was probably the most desperate.
How so?
Well, I was at this point I was very concerned. I had no idea what had happened. So I asked the question, what had happened? I told him I was very concerned. He, at that point,
Hold on there. Next question.
When he was talking to you, did you notice anything different in his voice?
yes,
What did you notice?
it was cracking. He sounded like he was crying.
And how long did the third telephone call last?
The third phone call lasted approximately a minute.
I'd like to show you what has previously been marked as Exhibit 490, which is a telephone record from Mr. Simpson's hotel room at the O'Hare Plaza Hotel. And looking at that document, do you see on there the phone number of the cellular phone that you were carrying with you that morning?
Yes, I do.
And how many times do you see your phone number listed there?
3 times.
Did there come a time when you arrived at the Plaza Hotel?
Yes.
And before I ask you that, how much time elapsed between Mr. Simpson's first call to you and the third call to you?
Approximately 20 minutes.
Can you check your records to verify?
Sure. Between the first call and the third call,
Correct.
9 minutes.
So he called you 3 times in 9 minutes?
That's correct.
And the third call, you said he thought he was crying.
Yes.
What'd you do when you reached the hotel?
When I reached the hotel, again, I parked the car up front. I ran inside to try to locate Mr. Simpson.
And was he inside?
No, he was not.
Without saying what occurred, did you speak with someone at the hotel about where he might have been?
Yes, I did.
After that conversation, did you attempt to look for him outside?
Yes,
Did you find out that he was there?
he was not outside.
Did you have a conversation with someone associated with Hertz about
Yes.
his whereabouts?
Yes, I did.
Who is that person?
John Johnson.
Without telling us what he said, what'd you do after that conversation?
I hopped in the car and sped to O'Hare to try to put the clubs on the flight.
So you tried to catch his flight at the airport for the golf clubs?
Yes, I did.
There came a time, I imagine, when you reached the airport.
Yes.
And did you attempt to put the golf clubs on the flight that he was taking back to Los Angeles?
Yes.
Were you successful in putting the clubs on that flight?
No.
Did the clubs have to go on a different flight
Yes.
to Los Angeles?
Yes.
Did there come a time when you spoke with him again about the clubs?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson, I'm asking.
Mr. Simpson, yes.
And what day was that?
That was the following day, Tuesday.
Do you know the approximate time?
Approximately 11 in the morning.
Did you call him or did he call you?
He called me.
And during that conversation, did you give him the claim check for the bags, the claim check number for the bags to pick up in Los Angeles?
Yes.
Did you speak with him any more after that conversation?
After that conversation, no.
Now, Mr. Merrill, you are testifying here because you've been served with a subpoena?
Yes.
And how'd you travel out here?
Traveled by plane.
And were your flight arrangements made by the defense?
Yes.
And have you been staying in a local hotel while in Los Angeles?
Yes.
And have those arrangements been made for you by the defense?
Yes.
When Mr. Simpson called you on June the 14th, did he call to thank you?
Objection here, sir.
Sustained.
When he called you on June the 13th, there were other things that he spoke to you about other than the golf clubs.
Yes.
Objection here, sir.
Overruled.
Now, he had been scheduled to play in a golf tournament that day, correct?
On Monday.
The earlier day.
Right.
And because of the emergency, he was unable to play.
Yes.
And you had been the Hertz contact person concerning making arrangements for the golf tournament.
As far as OJ was concerned, yes.
Correct. So when he called you, did he talk to you about the tournament?
Objection here, sir.
Sustained.
One moment, Turner. Mr. Merrill, did there come a time on June the 16th of 1994 when you gave a statement to police officers concerning your observations?
Yes,
And was that about 5:30 in the evening?
approximately.
And did there come a time on June 23rd that you spoke with an investigator for the defense?
Yes.
And who was that person?
Pat McKenna?
Have you had occasion to speak with Mr. McKenna since then?
Yes.
On approximately how many times?
Oh, approximately half a dozen times.
Did some of those conversations involve arrangements for your travel to testify?
Yes.
Did some of those conversations involve arrangements for your travel to testify if needed at a preliminary hearing?
Objection, this is all hearsay, leading.
Sustained.
Was there an occasion when you met with lawyers representing Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
When was that? When was that?
Approximately 2.5 months ago.
And with whom did you meet?
Mr. Bailey?
Have you and I spoken before today?
Yes, we have.
When was the first time?
The first time was last week. I'm going to